my right, we have our Deputy Secretary General, Ensu Kang. We, the Secretariat, and the whole BALMUN team are delighted to see you. And for the next 3 days, you have the chance to debate on a topic we are all confronted with daily, especially as artificial intelligence advances. This year's topic is Better Together, Reshaping and Repurposing the Multilateral Structures as a Response to Growing Isolationism.
Our first speaker will be Mr. Steffen Bokhan, the Senator for Youth and Social Affairs, Health, Schools, and Sport. Mr. Bokhan, you now have the floor.
Honorable chairs, dear delegates, friends from across Europe and all over the world. It's an honor to speak to you today. You are here not only as students, but as young diplomats, people who believe that dialogue matters, that cooperation matters, and that the future can be shaped by those who dare to imagine something better. Your conference theme, Better Together, Reshaping and Repurposing Multilateral Structures as a Response to Growing Isolationism, could not be more relevant. Around the world, we see countries turning inward, people losing trust in institutions, and societies drifting apart. This rise in isolationism is not just a political trend, it's a warning sign. But it is also a chance to rethink how we work together. But why fails isolationism? Some real examples I want to point out. Isolationism often promises simplicity. We can handle everything alone. America first, Britain first, Germany first, but there's just one first place. But history shows that this simplicity does not work. Some examples for you. The COVID-19 pandemic. When countries competed for masks, vaccines, and medical supplies instead of coordinating, the result was chaos. Nations that tried to get it alone struggled longer and recovered more slowly. The virus didn't care about borders, and neither did the solution. Or let's take the climate change. A single country reducing emissions cannot stop rising temperatures. Everyone has to cooperate in our one world. When states withdraw from climate agreements or refuse cooperation, everyone pays the price. More floods, more droughts, more fires. Isolationism here is not just ineffective, it is dangerous. Or economic crises. When financial markets crash, no country is isolated. The 2008 financial crisis spread across the world in weeks. Nations that cooperated through international institutions recovered faster. Those that tried to shut themselves off suffered deeper recessions. And we see similarities today because of the crisis that follows up to the war on Iran. These examples show a simple truth. Isolationism creates problems that cooperation could have prevented. Why is better together more than a slogan? The challenges of the 21st centuries, climate change, digital security, migration, or global health, are too big for any country to solve alone, even for the biggest countries. That is why we have multilateral structures like the United Nations, the African Union, the Asian Union, the European Union, and many others. They are not perfect. They can be slow and very frustrating, but they are the best tools humanity has ever built for solving shared problems. And the question for your generation is not whether we need them, but how to reshape them so they work better. You are already more connected than any generation before you. You collaborate across borders every day, online, in classrooms, in projects, and here at this conference. Here are 3 ways your generation can strengthen global cooperation. For example, about youth participation. Young people deserve a real seat at the table, not just symbolic roles. Imagine UN committees with youth voting rights or climate negotiations with youth co-delegates. Or digital cooperation, cybersecurity, AI ethics, data protection. These issues define your future, your freedom and your liberty. You understand them better than many current leaders, including myself. Your voice is needed to shape global rules. And reforming institutions. Many international structures were created decades ago. They must become more transparent, more representative, and more adaptable. But they must not become just bigger and more expensive. Your ideas are needed and can push them forward. Dear delegates, I'm sure dialogue is a superpower. One of the most important lessons of multilateralism is this: talking is not weakness. Talking is strength. Diplomacy means listening to people you disagree with, even your parents. It means finding compromise when compromise feels impossible. It means choosing cooperation over conflict. And every debate you have here, every resolution you negotiate, every amendment you defend, these are the same skills that prevent wars, build alliances, and save lives. You may not realize it, but you're already shaping the future of international cooperation, not someday, today. By being here, you are rejecting isolationism. You are choosing connection. You are choosing understanding. You are choosing better together. And that choice matters more than you might know. So as you begin this conference, I encourage you to think boldly, challenge old assumptions, question outdated structures, imagine new forms of cooperation, and remember that multilateralism is not just about institutions. It is about people, people like you. You are the diplomats, the innovators, and the bridge builders of tomorrow. And the world you inherit will depend on the choices you make today. Let this conference be a reminder that even in a time of growing isolationism, there is another path, a path of unity, creativity, and shared responsibility, a path where we are truly better together. Let me give you a last quote. You just call on me, brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you'll understand. We all need somebody to lean on. Not even political, but wonderful. Bill Withers, lean on me. Thank you very much, and please excuse that I have to leave immediately because I have a very, very important negotiation in about 12 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Bokhan, for your inspiring words, as well as continuously supporting our BALMUN conferences over the past few years. Please accept this token of our appreciation. We would now like to welcome Mr. Markus Riemer, the Principal Headmaster of the Innerstädtisches Gymnasium Rostock. Mr. Markus Riemer, you now have the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Secretary General Atusa Koshiyom, Honorable Deputy Secretary General Enzo Kang, Honorable President of the General Assembly Susanna Skinner, Honorable Chairs and Student Officers, distinguished representatives from government, diplomacy, academia, and public life, dear directors, teachers, guests, delegates, and friends of BALMUN, welcome to the 18th Annual BALMUN Conference here at ISG Rostock. I would like to begin with a quotation by Rebecca Tatishev, principal of U32 High School in Montpelier, Vermont, and our guest today. Just the other day, she said, "There's a lot of noise in the world right now, and it is there by design." It is a remarkably simple sentence, yet it captures the spirit of our time with unsettling precision. We live in an age in which noise has become a political instrument. Noise distracts, noise divides, noise exhausts, and above all, noise prevents people from listening. There's this noise of permanent outrage, the noise of algorithms rewarding anger over nuance, the noise of propaganda disguised as patriotism, the noise of misinformation spreading faster than truth, the noise of isolationism, pretending that nations can somehow detach themselves from global responsibilities while still enjoying global stability. And when the world becomes loud enough, people begin to retreat into national identities, ideological camps, simplified truths, and increasingly into fear. This is precisely why the theme of this year's conference could not be more on point. Better together, reshaping, repurposing multilateral structures as a response to growing isolationism. This topic is not merely academic, it is not abstract diplomacy. It is the reality you are inheriting. We are witnessing a global order under pressure on nearly every continent. War has returned to Europe with Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine. In the Middle East, generations continue to grow up surrounded by conflict, displacement, and trauma. In parts of Africa, humanitarian crises unfold far away from the cameras of international attention. Across Asia and the Pacific, tensions over territory, resources, and power continue to escalate. And globally, democracies themselves are being tested not only by external enemies, but by internal erosion, polarization, extremism, distrust in institutions, the growing temptation to replace cooperation with confrontation. At the same time, humanity faces challenges no nation can solve alone. The climate crisis, migration, economic instability, pandemics, cyber warfare, food insecurity, artificial intelligence, and the protection of human dignity in a digital age. None of these problems stop at borders. And yet the political instinct of many societies today is not to open doors, but to close them. Not to cooperate, but to isolate. Not to build bridges, but walls. Isolationism offers the illusion of control. Multilateralism demands the courage of responsibility. It requires compromise. It requires patience. It requires listening to perspectives we may fundamentally disagree with. But history teaches us something essential. Whenever nations stop talking to one another, others begin deciding through violence instead. Diplomacy, therefore, is not weakness. Dialogue is not naivety. Compromise is not surrender. In truth, diplomacy is one of the highest forms of political and human maturity. It is the ability to remain at the table precisely when emotions tell us to leave it. And that is exactly what Model United Nations is about. BALMUN is not simply a school conference. It's a laboratory of democratic culture. A space where young people practice what many adults have forgotten. To debate passionately without dehumanizing one another. To disagree intellectually without becoming enemies. And to understand that complex problems rarely have simple solutions. Over the coming days, you will represent countries, interests, and positions that may not reflect your personal beliefs. And that is intentional. Because one of the greatest dangers of our time is the inability or unwillingness to understand perspectives beyond our and your own. Empathy does not mean agreement, but understanding how others think is the beginning of every meaningful solution. You, the delegates of BALMUN, belong to a generation that has grown up in a world of overlapping crises. You have experienced a pandemic, wars streamed live onto your phones, accelerating climate anxiety, economic uncertainty, and a digital environment that constantly competes for your attention. And yet, despite all of this, I remain profoundly hopeful, because I see a generation that is globally connected in ways that my generation has not been. A generation more aware of injustice, more aware of diversity, more aware of the responsibility we carry toward one another across borders, cultures, and identities. But awareness alone is not enough. The question is, what will you do with it? Will you contribute to the noise, or will you create clarity? Will you retreat into cynicism, or will you insist on participation? The future of multilateralism will not only be decided in parliaments, foreign ministries, or summit meetings. It will also be decided in classrooms, in universities, in civil society, in journalism, in science, and in conferences like this one. Over the next days, I encourage you not merely to perform diplomacy, but to take it seriously. Listen carefully, challenge respectfully, negotiate honestly, speak with conviction, but also with humility. And perhaps, most importantly, do not confuse winning an argument with solving a problem. The world does not need more noise. It needs more people capable of thoughtful leadership. People who understand that strength without empathy becomes brutality, that freedom without responsibility becomes chaos. The answer to fragmentation cannot be more fragmentation. The answer to fear cannot be isolation. The answer must be cooperation, grounded in dignity, reason, and humanity. Therefore, hosting BALMUN at our school continues to be an extraordinary privilege. It is exciting, empowering, and deeply encouraging to see students from different countries, cultures, and perspectives come together with intellectual curiosity and commitment. My sincere gratitude goes to the entire BALMUN team, the student officers, the organizers, the teachers, our partners and supporters, and every single person whose dedication and countless hours of work have made this conference possible. As always, my deepest respect for all the hard work Mr. Breitkopf and Regine Koch, the godmother of BALMUN, have invested in terms of time and passion. And as a principal, I could not be prouder of the students and teachers who continue to make BALMUN what it is today. And this also goes for all the teachers that are part of the MUN family and go the extra mile for their students to come here and go places. Dear delegates, the floor will soon be yours. Use it wisely, use it courageously, and use it to prove that meaningful dialogue is still possible in a noisy world. I wish you inspiring and fruitful debates, difficult negotiations, new friendships, and the confidence to believe that your generation can make a difference. Thank you, and welcome to BALMUN 18.
Thank you, Mr. Riemann, for your inspiring words and for supporting our conference. Please accept this token of our appreciation.
We will now be hearing a digital speech from this year's BALMUN patron, Ms. Reem Alabali Radovan, the Federal Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany. Unfortunately, she can't be here today due to her busy schedule, but she has also written a letter to greet all participants, which can be found in the BALMUN program.
Dear delegates, dear friends, let me begin by saying this. What you are doing here at the Baltic Model United Nations Conference matters. It matters that you come together from different countries with different perspectives and different experiences, and that you choose dialogue, not division. That is exactly what Model United Nations stand for. We are living in a time when many people are turning inward, when international cooperation is becoming more difficult, and when global challenges feel increasingly complex. As an international community, we are living in a time of shifting power, of challenges that do not stop at borders, from climate change to inequality, from conflict to technological disruption. And in moments like these, it is easy to feel overwhelmed. It is easy to believe that the problems are too big, the systems too complex, the future too uncertain. But what you are showing with your engagement as Model United Nations delegates is that this is not the whole story. Because you showed up, you are taking responsibility without waiting to be asked. You are part of something that is driven by students, shaped by your ideas, your energy, and your belief that things can be better. And that gives me hope that your generation will not turn away from the world as it is, but step forward to shape the world as it should be. At this conference, you are debating in councils and committees. You are searching for compromise where none seems possible. You are learning what it means to represent interests and what it takes to reconcile them. And in doing so, you are learning something essential, that progress is not about winning every argument. It is about building common ground, and that a fairer world is not built by a few, but by many, working together. So when you leave this place, I ask you to carry that with you. Carry the conviction that your voice counts. Carry the understanding that cooperation is key. Carry the belief that even in times of change, especially in times of change, you can build something better. Because the future is not something that simply happens to you. It is something you shape. And if your engagement here is any indication, then the future is in good hands. Thank you.
We hope that this video could provide you with thought-provoking information. And now, distinguished delegates, honored guests, and dear friends, behind every successful conference stands someone whose passion, dedication, and hard work make it all possible. Over the past months, our Secretary General has devoted countless hours creating not only a place for debate, but also a community built on respect, cooperation, and understanding. Her commitment to this conference and to the values of diplomacy has inspired all of us, and we are deeply grateful for her leadership and perseverance. It is now my great privilege to invite Madam Secretary General Atousa Kosciom to deliver her speech.
Infinite justice for some means infinite injustice for others. That is a quote from the book The Algebra of Infinite Justice by Arwadi Roy. But how can justice for some simultaneously mean injustice for others? Well, in order to understand that, one has to comprehend that oftentimes opposites define one another. Meaning, what cannot define what light is without knowing what dark is. Now, it is a question whether justice should be treated as such, or rather as a fundamental human right. For justice to have a meaning in a system, we need to have injustice. But does that not contradict the point of international law, which is actually supposed to care for globalized justice? Now, you may ask yourself why I've mentioned this. One driver for isolationism is prioritizing one nation's justice and interests, and often at the cost of other nations' justice. An example for this involves a silence from certain nations when others are suffering, because global problems need global solution, not global silence. We are all unique. Every individual has their own unique experiences that form who they are alongside their reactions to these. It's a human instinct to strive to find people you click with, people you agree with, people who not only understand you, but also agree with you. That's also mainly how you meet new people. As a small child going to your piano lessons, you became friends with people who also treated playing the piano as more than just a hobby, allowing you to connect over the same instrument. Watching how the music, the feeling of pressing down the keys, and the satisfaction when you finally play a song without any mistakes become a secret language only understood amongst pianists. We often believe we can keep our identities protected if we don't risk it being questioned. And by isolating ourselves from opposing opinions, we try to keep our identities and also ourselves secure. No one would like to have their values and opinions be questioned, especially not with opposing facts supported by sources. But isolating yourself from people who may not share the same opinion as you actively results in social segregation in our society, seen by the political left-winged and right-winged gap due to the lack of productive discussions with reliable arguments. We often fail to believe that we could have anything in common with people who disagree with us. But the truth is, we have more in common with people we think we have the least in common with than we actually like to believe. Because everyone wants peace, everyone wants safety, and everyone wants security. The only difference is believing you have different enemies. On a global scale, there is the example of North Korea, which has gradually isolated itself more and more year by year. One may ask themselves, how did humanity watch it happen right before their eyes and actually let it get this far? Well, in this very moment, we have it happening right in front of our own eyes with other countries. Iran, for example, has cut off the internet in the past and thereby any access to the external world that exceeds the imaginary walls they've built. A first step towards isolation. As women in Afghanistan keep suffering and becoming less day by day, Afghanistan gets more and more isolated through sanctions. And yes, of course, one may intend to have these sanctions as a form of last resort and actually aim to restrict a regime that violates human rights through them, but the citizens are the first ones to suffer under such circumstances, thereby also being left abandoned, left without any access to hope. Even a globalized world like ours is at risk of isolation. It can be a double-edged sword, functioning both ways. Either slowly isolating yourself from the external world by cutting off the internet, hoping the word of systematic sufferings doesn't reach the outside ear, and creating your own world within your imaginary borders, soon hoping to create an actual wall, or being isolated like a child being bullied by the school kids, not having any access to help. But in this case, it's the citizens, it's the children, and it's the minorities being ripped off their voices by the regimes on one hand, and ripped off any access to food or economic sustainability and stability through sanctions on the other hand. You can disagree with the regime and with systematic oppression, but still at the same time question if sanctions and isolation can help. It's a gray matter. It's not always clear like day and night. It's not a secret that it can help in certain cases, such as when hoping the regime will fall and security as well as freedom comes back to the once free land. But it should not be a solution to run to each and every time, because perhaps sometimes global problems need more integration than abandonment. Furthermore, let's not forget one of the main causes of isolationism, which is nationalism. One has to understand that nationalism is not patriotism, as it exceeds far beyond the love one may feel for their nation. It is to prioritize one's culture as well as interests, often resulting in them disregarding the ones of others, due to a belief of preeminence
and superiority. Now, it is not wrong to love a culture, certainly not the one that you were born into. But here's a decisive factor. To spread the feeling of entitlement to that culture, just because one was lucky enough to be born in a developed country, that is fundamentally wrong. This leads to the origination of isolationism, and it is crucial to understand this as it builds a sense of distrust towards the outside world. This us versus them mentality segregates humanity, because how is there an us if the only thing keeping us connected is the culture we were accidentally born into? How is there a them opposing us if one can feel more understood and integrated by the outside world or by the other side? Should it not rather be treated as an aspect of individuality rather than the means to define their worth or whether they're worthy of your respect? One can feel very hopeless at times, feeling like nothing one can do can change anything systematically. But even talking about it, talking to people you may not agree with, is a very first and small step that one can take. It is very prevailing for people to avoid getting into conversations or interactions with people who do not share very prominent beliefs with themselves. Because, well, how could one face such a confrontation without sensing their identity being put at risk? But isn't exactly that what enforces a social segregation among social groups? How can one preach for gender equality, for more sustainable development, or even for global citizenship if one also isolates themselves from people that might not share the same opinion as them? Isn't that what individuality within a society is all about? A society cannot reach its fullest potential if individuality treated with tolerance is not dominant. How can those who have been systematically manipulated into believing that one gender deserves more than the other be given a chance to change their worldviews otherwise? How can those excluded from quality education, those who have not been shown a different approach, and those who seek conformity within society be expected to miraculously change their opinions? And how can you then expect to see a change in the world, if not through a conversation? Be the change you want to see in others. Be more open and talk with one another. Be more tolerant and accepting towards others. That is the closest thing to this world being saved. That is what being a human is. So try to find something in somebody else that resonates with you, even if they may play the guitar instead. Thank you.
Thank you, Atusa, for putting your time and effort into making this conference happen. Now, we would like to introduce our first keynote speaker, Mr. Timo Rougon. Timo Rougon is a director of the DRC Country Program of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, which he joined in July 2025. He previously worked for the Munich Security Conference and is an active practitioner of international relations. After the speech, you will be given time to ask questions to Mr. Rougon. Mr. Rougon, you now have the floor.
Honorably Secretary General, dear Sir and Madams, dear delegates, thank you very much for being with you today. My name is Timo Rojan. As I was introduced, I'm the head of the Konrad Adenauer Country Office in DRC, and I would like to start with a little personal anecdote. The theme of the conference today is Better Together, how we can make cooperation work again. And as you may have noted in my name, I would always say, full French and full German, work of Konrad Adenauer, Charles de Gaulle himself. And if I speak today as a, I would say, young practitioner of international relations who grew up in between borders of two countries which were previously deeply divided and always in constant war with each other, I think it's a great example to see that cooperation works and it's worth to fight for. Now, enough of the little personal anecdote. We are here to talk about today a country which unfortunately makes the headlines and the news a lot these days because of the Ebola virus and the pandemic in the Eastern Congo. However, you're going to see that the Congo is far more than these bad headlines that you always receive in the media, but a very interesting case of why international cooperation is needed. So, to start with, the Congo is situated in the heart of the African continent. As Germany, it has 8 neighboring countries. The Congo has 2.3 million square meters of territory. That means, just to make a little shot on Central Europe, that would be the Congo if you would compare it to Europe nowadays. The Congo has 110 million inhabitants. It's the second largest country of Africa after Algeria, and the 11th largest country in the world. It is mostly Christian from his religion, and it was already in contact with the Europeans from the 15th century on, when Portuguese traders discovered the Kingdom of Congo, which later gave the name to the country, on the delta of the Congo River. And the Congolese kingdom had at first a quite amicable relationship with the Portuguese itself, because it becomes tremendous rich by participating in the triangle trade back then, and by the same depopulated its own country, which in the end led to the decomposition of the country. So here once more we see that short-time gains is not what we should aim for, but we should look ahead and always think about in the decisions we take of how they will impact our future. In the late 19th century, it was then again discovered by the researcher and adventurer Robert Stanley, and became the private possession of King Leopold II of Belgium. Back then, there was a geopolitical rivalry about having colony. It was a time of imperialism where European forces tried to conquer the world, and so there was a fight between France and Belgium about the territory of Congo, but also in the east, Zanzibar slave traders already penetrated in this land, which was later called in the famous book, The Heart of Darkness. During the rule of Leopold II, the fundaments of the society were heavily disrupted. It was the time of the Industrial Revolution, where the hunger for rubber was enormous. And when we speak of the Congo, we often speak of the red rubber for the crimes which were committed by Leopold II against the Congolese civilization. And these crimes were so enormous that the Belgian state intervened with international pressure and took away the private colony of Leopold II. But even today, and you will see, the Congo remains a country where a lot of interest met. Maybe the most important first for us all as humanity is the Congo Basin and the Congo Basin forest. It's the second largest tropical or equatorial forest of the world, and if the Earth would have lungs, one would be the Amazon, the other would be the Congo River Basin forest. And the integrity of this ecosystem is, you can all imagine, enormously important when it comes to research, but especially for fighting the climate change. The Congo River itself transports, even though it's smaller, transports more water than the Amazon River and has also a great potential for renewable energies. The Congo is organized like Germany in a federal system where you have 26 provinces which on paper, if the constitution would be respected, have their own autonomy in I would say, managing the current affairs of the provinces. The system itself of the country is semi-presidential. It means you have an elected prime minister by the parliament as head of government and a president elected by the citizens themselves as head of state. And when you're gonna see now the provinces and where they are situated and the resources, so we are talking now about raw materials of the Congo, you will discover that Kinshasa, which is here on the edge of the Congo, and the rest of the country is very unequal distributed. So if you see the map now with the major deposits of minerals, and a lot of them critical and really essential for the digital transformation, you're going to see that the capital is quite isolated from the Central African copper belt, where you find copper, but also cobalt in huge amounts. 80% of the world cobalt, which is used, come from this region in the south of the Congo. And cobalt is what nowadays makes possible to have like cars and battery systems which can go more than 100 miles with a battery charge. So this region is of a global importance. In the east, you have all the tins, or also the free Ts. So it's rare earths and also a lot of gold. That's the yellow points, also used in digital technology. And in the center, you have the big diamond mines. So as you can see, there's the economic strongholds of the country are far away from their own capital. And if you look at how the infrastructure in the Congo is organized, you will see why this is a problem. So you have the river system as a big, I would say, as a big transport highway for goods. However, the river is not always navigable, and you have like no big highways connecting the capital to the south, which is extroverted towards Zambia and Angola, and you don't really have a big highway connecting the east with their own capital, which is why the neighboring countries of Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi has also a great say in the economic organization of the eastern part of the country. And that leads, in in Africa to a really big amount of regional cooperation associations. The Congo itself here is on 3 of them. So there's the Central African Community of the Great Lakes, there's the East African Community, and there's the South African Development Community, SADC. So when we talk about multilateralism, when we talk about cooperation, you see that the African continent is highly divided. Not only the world, but the continent in itself has major different groups and organizations which often economically compete with each other, which is also a big, I would say, barrier to common development. Because if you then see what would be the cooperation excesses, so a corridor between the North and the South Africa and a corridor between the East and the West, you see that these are red. That means it indicates that these corridors, even though they would be very important for the transportation of goods, people, these are infrastructurally very poor and they are border controlled, so there's no free trade or free circulation of goods and people like we have in Europe. That's also impacting the economic potential of the entire Central African region, which stays one of the poorest in the world. If you talk about poverty, 70% of the Congolese are suffering from food insecurity, and approximately a third of the Congolese lives with less than $2 a day. So we can already see that this isolationism of the Central African area leads also to a poverty of the people, because there is not this capacity of creating benefits and, yes, common prosperity across borders. And now we talked to what's gonna be your topic also the coming days, the conflicts in the Great Lakes region and especially in the East. So we have a capital which is far away from the East and which often neglected the Eastern territories. The yellow and the red points, or the bubbles in general, are like conflicts. They can be battles, but it can also be political protests, riots, and you see that there are a lot of them. And if you compare with the resource richness of the region, so all these little yellow points and the white points are mines of gold and of the tin family, so critical minerals. You have a direct correlation between the occurrence of conflict and critical minerals. And here, once again, the international community is asked for regulation, because all these materials which are where armed groups are competing for are ending in your mobile devices and the computers and the battery cells of cars. So the international community has a responsibility so that these minerals can benefit foremost the Congolese and not being the game of different warlords competing for them. And so the world needs regulation and also transparency where the minerals come from we use in the gadgets of our everyday life. And this crisis, the security crisis in the East, led to the longest UN missions we have nowadays, the MONUSCO. The MONUSCO is there since the mid of the 90s. After it was put under pressure by the Congolese government of being ineffective, it decided to partially withdraw in 2024. But after the withdrawal of this peacekeeping force, the East, the security situation of the East even more deteriorated, why the Congolese government in the end came back to the United Nations to ask the mandate to be prolonged and that the MONUSCO stays in the Ituri and in the northern Kivu. As before, it was also in the southern Kivu and Tanganyika, regions which are nowadays partially under rebel occupation and where there's a lot of displacement. So we have, when it comes, again, this is now food insecurity, we have like a huge problem when we come to the eastern provinces and also the provinces next to the conflict regions. But we have to understand that these conflicts in a globalized world are interconnected. So the mineral conflicts depend with our economic system. We have like ethnic and language conflicts, or which depends with the neighboring countries. So it is important to understand, and that's exactly the theme of today, that you cannot take problems and consider them in an isolated way. When you talk about the crisis in the DRC, you have to understand the different factors which interplay with each other. And one of them is, yes, also the topic of food insecurity. So you have to imagine you have a country which has more water resources than most of the other countries on the African continent and which is covered by forest, where unfortunately the interest of only concentrate on mineral exploitation makes that other areas of the common life, like the agricultural sector, are neglected. So also here you see that Congo is highly dependent for its own food sufficiency of its neighboring countries, namely Tanzania and Zambia. This all to say that you have to create zones of common interest where goods and people also can fluctuate easily, so there can be common shared values, but also common shared interest. But because as we all will discover the coming days, and we all knew, values can differentiate, but as the General Secretary rightly said, there is an interest, a common interest in security, of health, of living in peace. And the Congo case clearly highlights that with more cooperation, the regions of the Great Lakes, which is of an importance for us all, could go ahead far stronger. Often also when it comes to the African continent, we talk of migration, but if you can see, the major migration routes are not going through the Congo and are not starting from the Congo. So in Congo you also have what is called a crisis of IDPs, so internal displaced person. So of the 110 million inhabitants, approximately 10 million are in a situation of internal displacement. And also here the UN organizations are playing, the UNHCR are playing a major role in trying to support these populations which are affected by the conflicts, especially once more in the East. And those which have the pleasure of being in the Security Council later, they're gonna get some more insights about the deep-rooted causes in this Eastern conflict. So, to summarize, when it comes to the Congo and to the Congo case, it becomes very clear that isolationism is not an option. The UN is heavily engaged in the international community in trying to stabilize this country in the heart of the African continent, and the stabilization of the Congo is going to be the stabilization of the entire Central African community and region. In this regard, I hope that you delegates, when you're going to debate about the Congo, about peace, about security, you will acknowledge these words and try to find common solutions to common problems. And I say thank you very much for your attention, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your compelling speech. We appreciate your time and effort greatly. We now have time for three questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand or placard high, and one of our staff members will provide you with a microphone.
Hey, can you hear me? Sorry. You mentioned that the DRC is obviously one of the most resource-rich countries worldwide, specifically cobalt. And I wanted to ask, the DRC is a country that, in my opinion, gets exploited by Western countries, since cobalt is so valuable to us. Like, we wouldn't have all of our devices without countries like the DRC. And I feel like countries, if all these minerals and resources were in a country like Russia, they would make much more financial benefit from it. And I want to ask if you see in the near future a realistic and sustainable way that countries like the DRC could be more financially beneficial and like get more of a profit, since the exploitation of cobalt isn't only has negative impacts on the environment, but also they simply just get exploited from Western countries.
So, thank you very much. The exploitation of Western countries took place during the colonial times. Nowadays, when we see on the actors on the ground, it's far more diversified, and one key actor in the Congolese mining sector is China. But independent of the different actors at stake, the question remains, how can this resource richness benefit more the Congolese? And there are several problems when it comes to the resource exploitation in Congo. For sure, you have also topics, especially in the east, where the mines are controlled by armed groups. You have kids which works in the mine, but in overall, Congo just has a small access to the sea. So most of the minerals have to transit out of the country. So you don't have a transformation on the ground. So the value added to any mineral which is transformed is not taking place in Congo. So if you need just some grams of cobalt to produce the battery cell of a cell phone or lithium, you're gonna have, and you re-import finished cell phones, but you yourself, you just exported the raw material, you're gonna have always a trade deficit. So the importance here is technologically sharing technology. So in some regard, the Congo must be able to process its own materials in a way that it is able to have more shares of the finished product in the end. And, well, unfortunately as well, you have to say that to be exploited, it's not nowadays like cannon boat politics. So it's not like that the Congolese government would be forced to give these minerals in a raw state. So also you have to see the aspects of corruption within the country, where people instead of trying to create industrial politics and really an economic environment where industry wants to settle in the Congo, is not given. So also it's on a certain part not only the bad foreigners who come to exploit the country and the minerals of the country, but also the government itself in certain ways which lets himself being exploited.
Can we have a microphone over there, please? You're recording. Can you raise your hand again? Thanks.
Mentioned that there's been a lot of resource extraction in the Congo. To what extent has this damaged the environment for the people living there, and how has that played into the terrorist and separatist movements that are going on there and the poverty that's happening there?
Thank you very much. As you remember, the Congo is not only research rich, but it benefits also from one of the greatest forest and water ecosystems. Also, you have to understand that this green forest is dense tropical forest, but you have also the subtropical forest covering all the other parts of the country. So when we talk about the Congo, and especially also the destruction of the mining sector, it impacts the quality of water, it impacts the water systems, and it also causes the destruction of nature, even not only the human exploitation. And for sure there are now a lot of the European Union try to establish rules how minerals are supposed to be imported, how minerals are supposed to, we are all talking, that's how value chains can be cleaner, but we don't have to forget that extraction, when you take something out of the ground, it's not gonna come again. So even if you talk about green economy, we have always to keep in mind that it stays, even if it's for battery cells, the extractive process itself, it's not sustainable. And it never will be sustainable because it's not just something you can plant and which grows again. So in this regard, we really have to think about how we can use these resources of the Congo in a way which impacts the importance also of this ecosystem and of the people living there, but also how, when they are extracted, how we can use them in the most sustainable way as possible, so that we don't have to dig one crater after another. If you see, and I invite you all to go one day on Google Earth and to tap Kolwezi, so the south of the Congo where the copper belt is, you're gonna see that the destruction and the pits which are carried out there are just gigantic. So we have to, when we discuss about these resources, there is no clean resource extraction. We can simply limit the damage, and it should be of international responsibility, since the entire world needs these minerals for the transition we are living, to take on this responsibility that the environment and also the ecosystems where a lot of people live from are maintained sustainably.
We will not be obtaining any more questions due to time restraints. Sorry.
So if there's any question also, maybe in the pauses, just
Yeah,
feel
but
free
afterwards.
to come towards me. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Mr. Roujon, for your speech as well as for answering the questions. Your speech has provided important perspectives that will undoubtedly accompany us in the coming days. Please accept this token of our appreciation.
Thank you as well.
Now, I am pleased to introduce our next keynote speaker, Ms. Carlota Di Vivanco. She currently serves as an evaluation officer with the UN Sustainable Development Group's System-Wide Evaluation Office, where she contributes to advancing system-wide accountability and learning, including in bodies such as the Economic and Social Committee. In the last 15 years, she has been switching between UN entities and numerous countries, working at headquarters in a regional and country level. Ms. Di Vivanco, you now have the floor.
I have the pleasure of being the last speaker and the only thing between this and it being your turn, so I'll try to get out of your way as quickly as I can. Global Partnership for Development, one UN, delivering as one, united in action, working as one, communicating as one, acting as one, fit for purpose, transforming our world, new way of working, our common agenda, recover better together, better together. I just walked you through 15 to 20 years of UN slogans to get us to now. I actually skipped a whole bunch of them in between. All of these over the past decades have been slogans or jargon or concepts to describe pretty much one and the same thing. That is the absolute necessity to work together. Why do we need so many different ways to say exactly the same thing? Why is there a periodical rebranding of exactly the same notion? Why do we require some lofty term to tell us what actually we should already know? I don't know many of you, or actually almost nobody in this room, so forgive me if what I'm about to say is not news to you. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page for this little journey I'd like to take us on. The United Nations is, maybe unfortunately, not the coherent monolith, or let me use a kinder word, the coherent organism that it's sometimes made out to be when we talk about it. It's an incredibly complex system of structures that sometimes intertwines and over time has grown apart rather than together. This might sound familiar to you. The UN development system, meaning all of the parts of the UN that sort of work on development, is somewhat loosely defined, but let's just use the UN Sustainable Development Group as a proxy. It's made up of 38 UN entities, all with different mandates, with different setups, with different governance mechanisms. And we speak about them as if they work together, but they don't all the time. So I'd like to walk you through a few moments in time, a few of these slogans, and just have a sort of personal reflection for these moments. So we'll start in the distant 2003. A BALMUN conference, the last one I attended. And at the time, there was something that you might still remember, the Millennium Development Goals, that set these 8 goals about what together would do to push forward development. I, like you today, embarked on the wonders of simulating this exciting space in which states come together to forge an agreement. Let's skip forward to sort of 2009 and 2014, where the slogan of the day was delivering as one. I was working in Rome, and for the first time I encountered the idea of working in silos. It felt particularly ironic at the time because I was working for the Food and Agriculture Organization, but it's a good image. It's sort of tall, stable structures that are impenetrable, but they can often sort of stand right next to each other. And that's kind of what I found in the world that was working there. I'd like to give you a little bit of an example. Nutrition is something that sort of seeps across the mandates of various organizations. There's FAO, there's UNICEF, there's WHO, there's WFP, and each of them sort of approach this in a completely different way. And at the time when I was there was finally a bit more talk of trying to, together, try to fix these issues in some places. And what came out of this is sort of the beginnings of what they now call One Nutrition, and there's the Scaling Up Nutrition movement, where these various agencies bring their expertise to try to more sort of sustainably approach the same problem. We'll skip ahead again to 2014 to 2016, where I was in Iran, and at the time, GA Resolution 70-1 came out, which is Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I saw it outside, the SDGs, the colorful goals we all know. Agenda 2030 in many ways revolutionized, yes, I'm going to exaggerate, but it sort of is true, the idea of how we should work together. It was a common set of goals that apply to all countries, that are indivisible, that are linked in a way that depend on each other for success. So you cannot try to solve one without, in a way, addressing all of them. In Iran, I saw the example of the UN country team coming together with a clear conviction of what they wanted to advocate for. They clearly tried to craft language that could allow for some sort of rapprochement on the area of human rights that is not always very openly and welcomely discussed in that country. Together, they tried to find the right words that would open doors rather than slam them shut. I'm going to take another little jump to the Caribbean in 2016 to 2018, and at that point we had another wonderful little slogan, the one program, the one fund, one communication, one plan. And sort of at the eve of the new Secretary General that is about to leave now, there was already a movement to sort of rethink how the UN would work together, to be able to do things better at the country level. In a way, what I saw was the precursor for the elements of what comes next, because the Secretary General proposed in 2017, in response to finding a system that was really not well placed to actually implement Agenda 2030 and to actually work together in an interlinked way that would transcend the mandates that they all had. So, in GA Resolution 72-79 on repositioning of the UN development system came a sweeping set of reforms to make the UN development system more efficient, transparent, and coherent, all very big words that are important though, to better implement this agenda. At the time, in the Caribbean, I was in a region that in a UN context has recognized that with some exceptions, it is not populous enough, there's not enough people there to receive the attention that it actually requires, even though they are disproportionately hit on things like climate. And together, in the context that you are about to simulate in the next couple of days, they have recognized that they are a powerful voting bloc and voice together. Okay, I've finally gotten us to now. We're almost there, everyone. Let me borrow some words about right now from the actual Secretary General himself, because he has a speechwriter, which I do not. And in the latest report in which he sort of tells member states about how it's going in the development system, he says, more than 80 years after the United Nations was established at the deadline of 2030 draws into clear view, the global context has shifted sharply. With fewer than 5 years remaining, the Sustainable Development Goals are alarmingly off track, official development assistance is declining at historic speed, and the world faces a development emergency. The need for a coordinated and adequately resourced United Nations development system that delivers concrete results for people who most need them has never been greater. What we can see now, though, is a refragmentation of landscapes that have precariously been built together over decades. In the face of challenges and unforeseen circumstances, like the current funding cuts, like the rise of authoritarianism, the rise of isolationism that we heard about today, it is incredibly important to unite rather than fragment. We have a responsibility to lead by example and incentivize and reward collaboration rather than fueling division. Here they are again. All of these have a common thread. If we want to be a bit cynical, we could call it a repackaging of the same concept over and over again. Over and over, someone is trying to find the right words that will wake us up, that will lead us not to just buy into the rhetoric that teamwork is the dream work, but actually act like it. We know we have the science, we have the research. With every day, our world is more and more intertwined in both good and bad. If I say that our world is more and more globalized, I'm sure there's just about a few eye rolls in the audience, but despite this, over and over again, choices are made to divide, to forge individual paths at the cost of the collective. Choices are made over and over again to work alone and in parallel rather than together. Working together is a choice. There's always a choice to collaborate, to share information, to coordinate. Yes, there are factors that may make it harder, but it is always a choice. So, let me finally turn to all of you now. Be better. Do it together. You can hold the system accountable. It works for you. You can learn from what you do here and apply it in whatever you go and do out there. The Transforming Our World, Agenda 2030, is built entirely on the premise that many areas and topics are intricately linked and intertwined. They cannot be resolved on their own, nor can they be addressed on their own. It is a systems approach that calls for a much deeper form of collaboration, symbiosis, you could call it. Use this opportunity in the next few days to really practice the craft of using words to build a consensus among often adversary ideologies. Use this opportunity to see how sometimes the same words can hold the right meaning from many a different point of view. For this, you can draw some inspiration from a master of words, Alexander Hamilton, or rather Lin-Manuel Miranda, who wrote about him when he said, "Your sentences left me defenseless. You built me palaces out of paragraphs. You built cathedrals." Okay, enough of borrowing the words of others. Be better. Make sure that your delegation says in what your delegation says in one committee aligns with your priorities in another. Ensure you know what your colleagues are pursuing in your name. Go build palaces and cathedrals with your words. Learn to use your words instead of waging war. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Divanko, for your thought-provoking speech. The delegates will now be able to ask questions. Please raise your placards or hand, and a member of staff will give you a microphone.
the UN, obviously, the Sustainable Development Goals are something that is a great example of how the world should be shaped. But let's take the Sustainable Development Goal 1. I think it's no poverty. How do UN officials plan to realistically enforce this? Because this just is a goal that seems to many people, I think, just unrealistic and not possible.
Well, I think goals, the thing with goals that is always important is that they have to be aspirational. You know, you have to want more. You're not supposed to go out and try to achieve something that you know you can. I mean, that's easy. And I do think, you know, we know a lot of things. We know we have enough food in the world. We know we have enough things going on. It is a question of actually living up to this promise that we've put out there into the world. And we know the ways. We know how to do it. It's just, as I've been saying, we have chosen to divide rather than to unite. We've chosen, you know, the prosperity of some at the cost of, you know, like the greater inequality with others. So, I mean, I think there are ways. Progress was made. Unfortunately, the COVID pandemic and everything that has come since really put us back to where we were before. But just in that sense, there was, you know, we're moving forward, and I think that's what's important, to sort of not be disheartened by the fact that these goals might be lofty and seem impossible, but like I think we live in a world where we need to believe that nothing is impossible.
Could we please have a microphone over there?
First of all, thank you for your speech. I was just going to ask, from your experience with the structure of the UN, would you recommend for us delegates, if we're trying to solve an issue, should we try to create more organizations? And is that more beneficial to the United Nations and to actually addressing issues if there's more organizations, or is it actually more effective if there's less organizations?
That's a great question, and I'm sure many people would disagree with you. Please do not create more organizations. I think there are enough out there. I think there is a lot of room, and I'm, as you may have read in the thing, a UN reform nerd, and over the years they've tried all sorts of things about merging and getting people together and creating platforms in which people will work together. So I think absolutely there's no need for more. There is a little bit of a need to look at who is doing what and who could stop doing things because other people are doing them. And I think one thing that is easy in a forum like this, it is to create new funds, to create new organizations. But I would actually urge you to go out and look and see what's already there, because probably whatever you are thinking about already sits somewhere in one of these various organizations and in their mandates. And they may already be doing it, possibly not at a large scale enough. But so please do not, would be my recommendation.
We will be entertaining one more question. Please raise your hands. Can we? Okay, that's okay.
Thank you very much for coming. It's a pleasure to have a real international diplomat here at this conference. I wanted to ask you something about your work in Iran. How do you suggest Western nations are to contend with countries such as Iran who extend extremism to proxy states, a lot of which is against the interests and safety of Western nations? How do we still maintain friendly relations in this way?
I think there are unfortunately quite a few of those states in our international system, but I think I'm sort of one of these naive believers in the basic concept of the UN is that there can always be some sort of consensus found, the words I was trying to tell you about a little bit. And I think it's often easier to sort of take it down a notch and go on to working levels. And so both in my work in Iran or before with FAO, it's surprising there are states that do not have diplomatic relations. They do not speak to each other. They will not sometimes sit in the same room with each other. However, if you go to a technical level, I don't know, there's transboundary animal diseases in the Caucasus. And the people sitting in the ministries that deal with this, they have each other's phone number, you know, like the Azerbaijani will call the Armenian, will call the Turk, will call these things. They know who they are, and they get brought together in spaces like the UN, where it's sort of partially put aside what is wrong. So I think the important thing to come is to sort of go down onto a working level and find the commonalities, because I think in the end, even though we are driven apart by many things, there is this sense of collective and group that everyone sort of still want to seek out. They still want to be part of this community, every one of, even, I want to call them pariah states, whoever they may be.
All right, due to time constraints, we will sadly be moving on. Thank you again, Ms. Di Vivanco, for your enlightening speech and for taking your time to respond to so many of the questions.
Now, a selected number of delegates will deliver a speech.
We will start with the ambassador in alphabetical order and continue in groups of 5 to 6. The group will meet in front of the podium and hold their speech one after another. Delegates will be able to ask 2 points of information after every group. Please keep in mind that the ambassadors will not be permitted to answer. Please hold your applause until all speeches are finished. Afterwards, the speakers can return to their seats and we will continue with the next set of speeches. The speeches should not be longer than 90 seconds. For the point of information, please raise your placard and a staff member will hand you a microphone. And we will now start with the first group, consisting of Albania, China, Cuba, Colombia, and the Czech Republic.
Are the ambassadors present? Yes,
I think there was a slight miscommunication. The first group will be consisting of China, Cuba, Estonia, Finland, and India.
Honorable President, distinguished delegates, the delegation of Cuba is honored to be here today to discuss the future of global cooperation in a divided world. Today, we see many big problems around the globe. We see conflicts, climate change, poverty, and economic unfairness. For a long time, Cuba has faced unilateral actions, like economic blockades, which hurt our people and our development. We believe that no country should use its power to isolate or punish others. In today's world, no nation can solve global problems alone. The only way forward is through real cooperation and respect for every country's sovereignty. Cuba believes that international cooperation must be fair. It should not only serve the rich and powerful nation, instead it should help all people, especially in developing regions like Latin America, Africa, or Asia. We need a global system where every voice is heard equally and where we work together for sustainable development, peace, and human rights for everyone. Distinguished delegates, Cuba calls on all member states to work together honestly. Let us build a world based on solidarity, respect, and cooperation, not on a division and pressure. Our world faces many challenges, but we can overcome them if we work as equals. Thank you for your attention.
We remind you to please hold your applause until the end.
Honorable Secretariat, chairs, esteemed delegates, admins, and guests. Does a nation's right to be heard depend on the size of its territory, the scale of its wealth, or the nature of its ideology? The People's Republic of China has a clear answer. No. We believe all sovereign nations possess an inherent fundamental right to an equal voice. But for the last few years, there has been a major problem. An equal voice cannot be heard if nations retract into their own shells and attempt to face the world alone. We say this: let us stop. Let's stop for a moment and look at our partners. Let's stop for a second and take a step back from the brink of isolationism. Through strong initiatives such as the Belt and Road and our Global Social Security Initiative, China has shown our eagerness to start building a multipolar world based on true sovereign equality. And we stand ready to work with all the nations seeking genuine cooperation. Join us and let us work together to solve the issues that affect us globally, while fiercely respecting the unique developmental and political pathways chosen by sovereign states. Teamwork is the dream work. Let's finally act like it. Thank you.
Please keep your applauses until all 5 speakers have finished their speeches.
Multilateralism shapes the UN. Multilateralism shapes our policy. And multilateralism ensures world peace. Dear delegates, Honorable Secretariat, fellow ambassadors, the delegation of Estonia is deeply convinced that upcoming isolation threatens our world peace. Isolation of countries will give terrorism and radicalization a breeding ground, which will end in a second Cold War, with European countries in the middle of it. To keep multilateral structures and alliances such as NATO, we need to stand together and tackle Russia's aggressions in order to maintain world peace. Therefore, all UN member nations must work together and find multilateral and peaceful solutions in order to turn the UN history into an eternal peacemaking organization for our future. Thank you.
Distinguished delegates, global cooperation is at a crossroad, as highlighted by the World Economic Forum in its 2025 report. Since the establishment in 1945, the United Nations has shown that collective action can achieve meaningful progress. Yet today, challenges do not stop at borders. Climate change, poverty, cyber threats, and technological development affect all nations, while the trust between states is increasingly eroding. At the same time, we must acknowledge a growing concern. Some states undermine sovereignty through aggression and the use of force. Such actions violate international law and create insecurities far beyond their own region. Finland firmly believes that strengthening international cooperation is not a choice but a necessity. At the same time, our cooperation must become more effective in the response to modern challenges. Finland therefore urges all delegates to move beyond isolationism and work towards stronger international cooperation. Thank you.
Honorable chairs, dear fellow delegates, an ancient Indian philosophy teaches us one important truth. The world is one family. Yet today we see nations build walls of isolation, rising in nationalism, and abandonment of the vulnerable. India believes that isolation is not a natural choice, but a symptom of a broken system. To fight against isolationism, we cannot simply defend the status quo. We must achieve reformed multilateralism, reshaping our institutions and ensuring that no nation feels left behind. We stand ready to co-author a new chapter of global integration, where human rights are protected and peace is collective. Let us not just survive together, let us thrive together. Thank you.
We will now be entertaining 2 points of information. Please raise your hand or your placard and wait until a member of staff approaches you with a microphone. And ambassadors, Please keep in mind that you are not allowed to answer.
How can China speak of building sovereign economies when protectionist initiatives like acquiring ports in Sri Lanka, which China has done, have been proven to increase dependencies and reduce sovereignty?
Seeing as there are no further POIs left, we will now be moving on to the next ambassadors.
Next are the ambassadors of Italy, Kenya, Liberia, Netherlands, and Mexico. Please approach the podium. We also urge all delegates to keep in mind to hold your applause until all the speeches are finished. Thank you.
Honorable chairs and esteemed delegates, in an era marked by rising geopolitical tensions, climate instability, economic uncertainty, and technological change, one truth becomes increasingly clear. No nation, despite its power or prosperity, can face these challenges alone. Multilateralism is not merely an ideal, it's a necessity. Italy, as a founding member of the European Union and a committed partner within the United Nations, firmly believe that our shared institutions must evolve to meet today's realities. We must ask ourselves, can we make our institutions more inclusive, efficient, and responsive? To answer these questions, I would like to quote the Bible, specifically the New Testament, Mark 10:39 and Matthew 20:22. Yes, we can. Honorable delegates, multilateralism must not remain static. It must be reshaped, repurposed, and revitalized to reflect the interconnected world we share. And as previously noted by Mark, by Matthew, and more recently by President Obama, yes, we can. Italy stands ready to collaborate with any and all nations in this endeavor. Thank you.
Honorable Chair, esteemed delegates, esteemed guests, we gather here at a moment where we witness the world increase in isolationism and deepening polarization and growing distrust between nations, where many nations believe that the corporations and the institutions that we inherited, that we fought for, are failing and are not being addressed accordingly to the real world problems that they are facing. And many nations, ourselves included, as the delegation of Kenya, have tried isolationism before in history, and history has taught us it does not work. History has taught us it only works when we work together. And therefore, we also believe that reintroducing the theme of this conference, Better Together, that this is not a slogan but a challenge. And therefore, we also believe that it is important that in times where many nations believe that cooperation is not the means to a solution, but rather a hindrance, that we must believe that cooperation is the real solution to that, and also that it's not abandonment that should happen, but rather reforming them. And therefore, also as a delegate of the coming days, and also to all of you, we believe that we also carry a responsibility to show that diplomacy and dialogue still matters, and the collaboration is the foundation for lasting peace. Thank you.
Better together is not just a slogan. It is what the world needs now more than ever. Liberia was a founding member of the United Nations, but in the 1990s, the world looked away and Liberia lost 250,000 people in 2 civil wars, crossing every border we share. But with international cooperation, we have rebuilt to the point where Liberia's flag flies in the Security Council chamber. Today, the international system that have rebuilt us is under strain. Liberia knows both the costs of isolationism and the value of multilateral structures, structures built after 70 million deaths in World War II, as the world learned that no country survives alone. However, the system is imperfect. The Security Council still runs on 1945 power structures, with 5 veto powers, yet no permanent seat for Africa, no permanent seat to represent 1.4 billion people, no permanent seat at a table that decides their conflicts. The system is imperfect, but the answer to a flawed system is to reform, not to abandon. Better Together describes an ideal. Let us build it. Thank you.
Honorable Presidency, Honorable Chairs, distinguished delegates, Excellencies, and hardworking admins. The delegation of Mexico is honored to participate in this important discussion on the future of multilateralism and increasingly the fragmented world. Today we are witnessing a concerning rise in isolation, unilateral action, economic nationalism, and political polarization. At a time when global challenges transcend borders, from armed conflict and climate change to migration, pandemics, and economic instability, no nation can succeed alone. Mexico firmly believes that the answer to global division is not separation, but stronger cooperation. Mexico empathizes that multilateralism must not only serve powerful countries, but all people equally. International cooperation should promote sustainable development, human rights, economic fairness, and peaceful conflict resolution. Furthermore, global governance structures must provide greater representation for regions often underrepresented in the decision-making process, including Latin America. Distinguished delegates, Mexico calls upon all member states to reaffirm the commitment to multilateral cooperation and working together in strengthening the institution that safeguards international peace and stability. Thank you for your attention.
We live in the most connected era in human history. Yet, we are more divided than ever. We, the Netherlands, have noticed how recent protectionist policies have suppressed global merchandise trade and have led to a decline of nearly 4%. This is not a coincidence. This is the cost of isolationism, self-inflicted isolationism, moreover. For the global community, this trend is particularly concerning as our prosperity and stability reside in the well-being of international cooperation and economic exchange. The answer to the challenges of globalization do not lie in the abandonment of global institutes. We must modernize our institutions. As a global community, we must rewrite our global frameworks, not destroy them. We need structural reforms that allow all nations to trade efficiently and collaborate transparently, which would include the review of outdated trade agreements. Let us fix the systems we have instead of destroying the cooperation we need. Because we live in the most connected era in human history. Let us use that to our advantage. Thank you.
We will now be entertaining 2 points of information. Please raise your hand or your placard and wait until a member of staff approaches you with a microphone. And once again, ambassadors, you may not answer. Are there any such in the house?
If not, then we will be moving on to the next speeches, which will be coming from the ambassadors of Norway, Philippines, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and the United Kingdom. Please approach the podium.
Honorable members of the Secretariat, distinguished chairs, dear delegates. The Kingdom of Norway stands before this Assembly with a clear conviction. To remain true to the United Nations, we must strengthen international cooperation. Founded after World War II to preserve peace, the UN's purpose is more important than ever in today's fragmented world. Our strength lies not in acting alone, but in working together through multilateral institutions. Norway is committed to reinforcing international cooperation, addressing global challenges, and supporting effective global governance. We would like to call upon all member states not to retreat behind borders, but to move forward together. Thank you.
If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, then we can go together. We, the delegations of the Philippines, deeply resonate with this meaningful proverb. And we hope that, dear delegates and distinguished chairs, you will too. When we speak about reshaping multilateral structures, we must recognize that the core problem not only lies in institution inefficiency, but in the lack of trust. Trust between the very decision makers that create these foundations for such structures. Nations that hold the fate of millions of people, playing politics as if their citizens are mere pawns in a chess game. It's no surprise that these foundations are beginning to crumble. What will remain of us if even teamwork has failed us? What happened to sharing is caring? The race for the strongest military, smartest AI, and the best developed economy has happened and is happening at this very moment, all due to the fear of vulnerability in front of others. Therefore, the Philippines urges all states to unite in mutual trust, because only together can we truly go far. Thank you.
Honorable chairs, distinguished delegates, better together. It is a noble phrase, but we must ask ourselves, together with whom? Together on whose terms? The United Nations was born from the ashes of a world war, a war in which 27 million Soviets lost their lives. 27 million. That is not a statistic, delegates, that is a generation. Generation that gave their lives to guarantee the sovereign equality of all states. And yet, what do we see? A small club of member states who confuse their own agendas with international law, who claim to defend a rule-based order while exempting themselves from every rule that inconveniences them. The question before this assembly is not whether the current system is broken, it is. The question is rather, are we ready to confess that the system is broken? The Russian Federation has never feared this question. We have bled for its answers. We are ready. The question is, are you? Thank you.
Good morning. Honorable chairs, distinguished delegates, and special guests. The delegation of Saudi Arabia is honored to be participating in the 2026 BALMUN Conference, and we hope that we can make progress on some important issues during our time together. Growing isolationism is an event that many nations are currently experiencing, and there are downsides. However, when a nation is negatively affected by large external pressures, and that can change the scope of how they are allowed to operate, isolationism can sometimes become the best course of action. Growing isolationism can lead to issues globally, and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia urges teamwork, while also understanding that isolationism can benefit certain nations. Thank you.
Honorable Secretariat and President of the General Assembly, distinguished delegates and chairs, guests. We are very thankful to be here today and represent the United Kingdom to address this core issue. Global cooperation is the nucleus of the United Nations and therefore a key principle of its function. The Honorable Henry Ford once said, Working together is success. The United Kingdom supports this statement. If everyone simply isolates themselves from surrounding countries and decreases international cooperation, less opportunities present themselves in terms of development, trade, and achievement of the general population's well-being. And some things are even impossible to achieve without foreign help. We intend to spread freedom and enable democracy and liberty as the combined United Nations. It is for this reason that we call upon all member states to work towards a future built on multilateral cooperation. Thank you for your attention.
We are kindly asking the ambassador of the DRC to please come to the podium as well and hold your opening speech as the last person.
Delegates, chairs, directors, and guests. There are over 120 armed insurgent groups in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. 6 million lives have been lost to such groups and their consequences in the DRC alone since 1996. The toll on humanity due to the lack of adequate multilateral structures is immense and still rising. The Democratic Republic of the Congo strongly opposes isolationism and views multilateralism and a rules-based global order as essential. Centuries of colonization have oppressed Africa. Why is it that a continent home to over 1.5 billion people has no permanent representation in the Security Council? It's time to decolonize the Security Council. The Democratic Republic of the Congo calls for a permanent African seat in the only body able to make legally binding decisions. Above all, the Democratic Republic of the Congo calls for international cooperation. The lack of multilateral cooperation is in our hands to solve. This assembly must act before the toll reaches 7 million. Thank you.
We will now be entertaining 2 points of information. Please raise your hand or placard and wait until a member of staff approaches you with a microphone. Ambassadors, please keep in mind that you are not allowed to answer. I believe we have someone back there.
Is the delegate of the Russian Federation aware that we fully support their positioning on the cruelty of the death of the 27 million Soviets, while still believing that this is not the foundation we want to base this around, because we want to look in the future for a brighter future, while still reflecting on the past, on the mistakes that were made?
We urge all delegates to utilize this near rhetorical question, as it is a good opportunity not only to communicate your policy, but also the relation between nations. Are there any further points of information?
Seeing as there are no further points of information, we will now continue to present our great chairs that make this conference possible. We begin with the chairs of the Security Council. Their topic is the situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Marek Chevchik, Bert Tabachnikov, and Marina Leitner. Please rise. This is your applause.
Thank you. Next, the chairs of the Economic and Social Council. Their topics for this year's conference are fostering multilateral cooperation and re-examining tariff policies to resist growing protectionism. Their second topic is transition from relief to development, driving solutions and addressing challenges for people in vulnerable situations in crisis. This committee will be chaired by Lily Hayes, Jeff Wang, and Daniel Gonzalez-Petroli. Dear chairs, please rise. This is your applause.
The topics of the First General Assembly, also known as the Disarmament and International Security Committee, are disarming terrorist groups and establishing frameworks for their reintegration in political processes, as well as combating the illicit arms trade. The chairs are Eliane Bordet, Claudia Lukander, and Ariana Robach. Dear chairs, please rise. This is your applause.
Next is the Social, Humanitarian, and Cultural Committee. Their topics this year are ensuring global protection of journalists to safeguard press freedom, as well as establishing rules for social media companies to combat fake news and hate speech. The chairs are Marie Bourez, Leiki Wang, and Lucy Porter. Dear chairs, please rise. This is your applause.
Now to the Environmental Assembly, with the topics of involving Indigenous people in the conservation of biodiversity in various ecosystems, as well as regulating corporate lobbying in environmental policy making. The chairs are Mirabelle Hamilton, Jonathan Lugani, and Faustina Bonzon. Dear chairs, please rise. This is your applause. And last but not least, the International Court of Justice, a committee we are honored to be hosting for the first time here at BALMUN. The topic this year is the application of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, Bosnia and Herzegovina versus Serbia and Montenegro. The chairs are Maxime Schnabel and Zara Auzova. Dear chairs, please rise. This is your applause.
Additionally, we would like to mention that the use of artificial intelligence is prohibited at BALMUN as the use of AI increases day by day, and we wish to prevent such use at this conference to avoid weakened critical thinking skills as well as worsened research skills. This results in an unfair competition. However, we are aware that AI can be beneficial as well. So therefore, the use of AI is only encouraged when looking for better synonyms or for a quick fact check, but not to write your speeches or your POIs for you.
The opening ceremony is coming to an end. We want to thank all speakers again for their time and effort. We wish all participants fruitful debates and successful work towards the secure education of future generations. Let's make this BALMUN conference a meaningful and impactful experience for everyone. And with that, I hereby announce the 18th BALMUN Conference as officially opened.
You can find all guest speakers, the room of your committee, and some guidance for the delegates in our program, which you can find on the BALMUN website. In order not to miss anything, you can follow the Baltic Herald on Instagram, where they will provide you with lots of very interesting information. The account is called @Baltic_Herald, but they also provide us with a freshly printed Baltic Herald each day of the conference, which we are already looking forward to. And lastly, the BALMUN film team has prepared an opening video for the conference, which we will be viewing shortly.
The person who actually got the Nobel Prize called me and said that I'm accepting this in honor of you because you really deserved it.
принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
I mean complete demolition by 12 o'clock. Burning, exploding, and never to be used again. And after that, they're gonna have no bridges, they're gonna have no power plants. Stone Ages, yeah. Stone Ages.
Das ist die Drecksarbeit, die Israel macht für uns alle.
מה הוא החזון שלך? מזה 30 שנה אתה רוצח סדרתי של עצור.
In 2008, we held our first bombing conference right here in Rostock. Since then, many students have joined us, and together we have forged bonds and found companionship. We have inspired each other to go the distance and reach beyond the horizon, even if it's scary. We have learned from each other just as much as we have taught each other. Our world has changed since then, but our principles remain the same. In a world of conflict, we seek to solve our problems diplomatically.
Respect and cooperation are the foundation of diplomacy. If we want to make progress, we need to work together.
This year, our topic, Reshaping and Repurposing the Multilateral Structures in Response to Growing Isolationism, encapsulates this tenet perfectly.
Welcome to the 18th Baltic Model United Nations Conference.
We're happy to have you here. We are beyond grateful for our film team for providing us with such a creative introduction to the conference and for investing so much time and effort into this. A big round of applause once again, please.
And before we finally kick off the 18th edition of our conference and dive into the exciting world of diplomacy, debate, and dramatic motions to suspend the rules, we have one more very important announcement.
To Aaron Koch, happy birthday. We hope this day is filled with great speeches, heated debate, and, if the universe is kind, at least one piece of cake.
Speaking of cake, the catering team has prepared a cookie break in the hallway for us, which will be from 11:45 until 12 p.m. Then the committees will be in session. Please find yourselves in your assigned rooms at 12 p.m. It is only respectful for you to be on time, and attendance will be taken. The staggered lunch break will begin at 1:15 p.m.
Seeing as we have reached the end of the opening ceremony earlier than expected, the cookie break will be longer. And with that, the opening ceremony has officially come to an end. Thank you for being here.